Player to Player interview series. This week we're going to sit down with Zoltan Dekany. Zoltan was actually my bass teacher when I was at university many years ago. He is currently working on incredible things like the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, the BBC Big Band, and he's a regular in the West End in London. The thing that really struck me about this chat was just the level of study Zoltan has gone through in his life. Most people like myself are happy with one institution, one degree. Zoltan has studied at some of the best conservatoires in the world with some of the greatest bass teachers and bass players in the world. It really is a fantastic chat and there's a lot of brilliant insight here. So enjoy the episode and we'll see you soon. All right then, so let's jump in. What's your early context of Zoltan as a bass player? At what point did you first get your hands on a bass? And then how did that move into your early education, early teachers? And what did that look like for you?
I had a friend of mine who had a double bass. Even before that, actually, we had an electric bass in the garage because my dad used to play trumpet as a semi-pro. And then when there wasn't a bass player, he had to play bass as well. So we had this really, really old and almost unusable electric bass. I asked him to let me use that. I was about 13 or 14 and I had dreams about playing it. So I thought, I need to play this thing. So I went into the garage and turned on the radio and started to kind of put my fingers on there. Nothing happened, no sound and all that. But we had a little amp. And so I tried to play pop songs of the day and all that and some R&B. So that was my electric bass start. Double bass. Very quickly after that, I wanted to go to double bass. And a friend of mine had a double bass. So I went and tried it. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. I have to play double bass. And I went home and I cried and then asked them to buy me a double bass. I asked my parents to buy me a double bass. And eventually, they couldn't say, look at the crying anymore. And so they got me a bass. And I went to a local school, I was very lucky actually, where I was born is the hometown of Zoltan, a great composer. So I went to this school where there was a very, very good double bass teacher called Frank or Ferenc Homoki. And so I studied with him for 2 years. He turned me on to great music, jazz, classical music. He taught me all the etudes and put me through the Simandl book, the Hrabe book, all of those things. So that was very good actually. And so from there, Franz Liszt Conservatoire, where I studied for 2 years with another very, very good, actually amazing double bassist called Ilona Vodas. Yeah, so that was my start. But I always wanted to play jazz. I always knew that I wanted to get the classical training, ear training, and everything. Not only double bass, or electric bass, but full musical training. Theory, harmony, ear training. We had very, very strict ear training, which I found was very beneficial to me afterwards, in especially when I started to play jazz, just to be able to hear and be able to be in an environment where people will throw all sorts of things at you. I was like, oh yeah, I hear what you're doing. And then to be able to follow that to me was very, very good to go through. Then from there, I went to Austria. I got admitted to the Hochschule für Musik und Darstellende Kunst. Don't you know, which is basically the college or university of music and performing arts, which is in Graz, Austria. Right. And there I had an amazing teacher, Wayne Darling, who Wayne used to play with Chick Corea. Wayne played with Henry Mancini. He was 20 years old when he played in the Henry Mancini band. All of my jazz stuff basically was from him. The 4 years I stayed there, and I did a lot of gigs then. I was a pretty good player at that point, so I worked a lot. And that was back in the day when, you had a lot more gigs than probably now, a lot more function gigs, jazz gigs. You had a very, kind of a varied palette of all sorts of different work that you could do. Then I went to LA. I got a scholarship to go to California Institute of the Arts, and I studied with Charlie Hayden there. And also another great bass player called Darek Oleskiewicz, who is a Polish-American bass player. Incredible, man. And he's just such a great player, very strong. And so my education actually was more from him than from Charlie. From Charlie Hayden, I got to go in and play for him, and then he would just play his bass and he would just play the way he played. He said, well, I would play it like this. It wasn't an explanation of there is a C minor chord and you play X and Y and Z on that. He would just play what he was an ear player. He was an amazing ear player. From him, I think the most benefit was that I got to stand in a room with Charlie Hayden and hear him play. That is a great privilege, and I knew that at the time. And It was great to have that. Derek covered everything else very meticulously, and then he turned me onto a lot of great music, and then you have that little extra to go and have these few lessons with Charlie, and so that was great. I also met great people there. There was another person, Alan Broadman, the piano player, the great piano player, who came in and taught improvisation. And actually, I got a 2-year gig because I did a class with Alan. And the next day, my first class with Alan, the next day he called me and no, sorry. A piano player called me and told me that I was recommended to him by Alan Broadbent. And so I fell into this 4 nights a week for 2 years, about a mile from Santa Monica Beach, So I thought, okay, that's good. So I was very lucky actually. I guess you have to be somewhat prepared so people notice you, but it's also a luck thing, I think, and it's also how people help you along your way. Because without that, I don't think I would be anywhere. So yeah, that was great. I met a lot of guys there, because a lot of people came in and sat in at that gig, and lots of different drummers, piano players, saxophone players, guitar players, whatnot. So I met kind of a cross section of the scene in LA, and also in the meantime, I met a guitarist called Rick Zunigar, who was who is still a phenomenal guitarist, Rick. And we did a lot of playing. That was yet another education for me, because for 2 summers I was at his house all day long, all week.
Yeah.
So basically 6 days a week, man. We would I would be there at 10 o'clock playing, and we'd play till like 4 or 5 in the evening, and then sometimes we'd play till 4 or 5, and then we'd have something to eat, and we just get in the car and go do a gig somewhere.
For those that are watching that don't know, I actually studied with Zoltan when I was at Leeds College of Music, as it was back then, now Leeds Conservatoire. So I had 4 years having lessons with you. And actually, when you were saying about the difference between your 2 teachers in LA, I can kind of relate to what you were saying about with Charlie to a certain extent, because I can remember the lessons. It didn't happen very often at all, but I can always remember the lessons when you just played piano. As much as it was great for my ear and you can hear the chords, obviously so much better that you're playing over, I was always kind of like, I always love the lessons when you played bass, because it's the same thing. You kind of just being in the room with someone who's at such a level as you were, or as Charlie was. There's so much inspiration in just sitting there and watching somebody do it. I think it helps people to realize that it's achievable. If you watch a human do it in front of you, you go, oh, right. I mean, it's very hard, don't get me wrong, but it's great as a student to be able to see that firsthand. As I said before we jumped on the call, I was at Leeds on Tuesday doing a talk about gigs and opportunities with the students there. I was saying to some of the people in the room that some of my earliest opportunities, a bit like you said with the piano player, were actually getting gigs from you. At the end of Leeds, I started doing a Frank Sinatra tribute and a Shirley Bassey tribute that Zoltan put me on after I graduated. So I think you can start to make an impression from day one.
Yeah, it's very, very good to be in person with someone, because you can really feel their strength. Yeah. Sometimes that actually doesn't come off a record. The playing will, of course, the music will come off, and then it's amazing and it's very strong. But to be with that person, I mean, you get that power that they have. My big main influence on electric bass is Jeff Berlin. So I studied with Jeff there as well. I mean, that was another incredible experience, how for 2 years Jeff would come in. And I saw Jeff on videos. He had this really funny video when he was there with a boxer in the ring and he was playing bass. And I was like, oh my, what's going on here? It's one of those kind of first DCI, whatever kind of videos, I knew he's playing, and to see this person coming the whole way, and you just go, and then you come in with him into the room, and he was playing to you, and Jeff, I'll have to say this, up until that point, I was a self-taught electric bass player. I basically just transferred everything I learned on double bass onto the electric, and so he just turned my playing around completely in 1 year, with the exercises he gave me, the transcription stuff he gave me, stuff to listen to, all of that. I mean, he really turned my playing around. I mean, there were a few things that he taught me that I practiced them religiously. I mean, you have to do the work.
Jeff's approach to chord tones, is that something that came from Jeff, or were you doing that before that? I really remember from my time with you, so much of the focus was on chord tones. And this was kind of before there were so many platforms like YouTube and Scott's Bass Lessons. They have courses all dedicated to that. Phil Mann talks about that all the time. Did that come from Jeff, or were you doing it with Charlie or with your other teachers before that?
That is purely from Jeff Berlin.
Right.
That is purely from Jeff Berlin. And I had these exercises that he looked at my playing and he said, I like what you're doing and it's melodic, but I can't hear the harmony in what you're playing.
Okay.
And so he said, you need to learn your chord tones. Yeah, it was all Jeff Berlin. It was
amazing.
All, and that is the thing that actually transformed my playing completely. Because and another thing that in LA at the time, you would play these gigs and they were great players. Rick. We played a lot with Brandon Fields, saxophone player who plays with Dave Wackel. I played with Alan Broadbent. You got to play with incredible players. And a lot of the times, it was just expected that they'll play their solos, and then it's bass solo, and they just leave the stage. And you go, hello, I've been comping you all night. Anything for me? No. So you had to learn to carry everything yourself.
Okay, so the audience can still hear the harmony.
Yeah.
Even if it's just you on the bass, they want to be able to hear those chords going by.
Exactly. So you don't get lost. You when you in your solo, you can be melodic and all of that, but you still have that harmonic background, which comes from chord tones. Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's something I very rarely play that kind of music, and I've said before in one of these that I definitely did. I did more bass solos in my final year of Leeds than I have done in the 20 years since, I think. But
yeah.
But yeah, it's something I still think about and still teach my students, is that thing of, if it's just you and a metronome, or just you and you, can you still hear the chords going by? Can you still hear the harmony in your notes?
Yeah,
because it makes such a difference to cleaning up somebody's playing. What's happening for you in 2024? Let's bring it right up to date. What are your current projects? I definitely want to talk to you about Zoltan's Bass Lounge, which is your teaching platform you have set up. Tell us about that. And then I know you're doing a lot of stuff in the West End still, and amazing gigs like the BBC Big Band, and I think some of the BBC orchestras as well. Let's start with Zoltan's Bass Lounge.
Okay. It is a site where I teach how I would have taught you, how I would teach somebody in front of me. So it's not so much of an entertainment thing, but you can see a lot of great bass players and a lot of all of that sort of stuff. There are, obviously there are amazing websites for that. There's Scott's Bass Lessons. There's Jeff Chalmers' Discover Double Bass, which is very, very nice. It's kind of almost more for professional people, And so I think I need to actually cater for people who might not want to be professionals and to just want to enjoy playing a few things. So that's what I'll be working on that.
I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out later this year. I think it's important to say that as a teacher, you have a pretty amazing hit rate. Just mentioned Jeff Chalmers there from Discover Double Bass, but I know from my year alone, Jeff was in that year, and another bass player called Joe Philpotts and Chris Hargreaves. We were all the same academic year, and all those guys are doing amazing things in the UK music scene. And I've met a lot of other guys down the years, Dan Owen and Hugh Foster, and to name just two, who are all doing huge gigs, and they've all kind of come through the Zoltan School of Music. People are looking for lessons. You've got such a track record and so much experience teaching people to the highest level. It's musical content. It's not going to be, this is how you play Mr. Brightside. It goes a little bit deeper than that. What kind of gigs are you doing at the moment?
I'm doing shows mainly. I'm just starting on Cabaret next week, so I'm going to do my first show on there.
The Kit Kat Girls.
But yeah. Just to go back to 23 for a second, we've done a real nice show called Sinatra the Musical, which was done by Frank Sinatra's youngest daughter, Tina Sinatra. And so that was a real nice thing to do, which hopefully will come into the West End at some point this year. And in the meantime, I've been just tapping on a few different shows, Wicked, Frozen, Lion King, coming into Cabaret. Hopefully there'll be some more gigs this year with the RPO. I have been playing with the RPO, with the Royal Philharmonic, just rhythm section stuff, when they need rhythm sections. So I really like those. It's nice to be using all of the experiences that I would have, from coming from classical music and jazz and pop and all of that, and just sit there in the orchestra and be a rhythm section player, and so you hear all the classical music, all the strings and the orchestra around you, and then you get to play the rhythm section with them. It's quite nice, actually.
Are you purely covering electric bass parts or jazz parts on the upright, or are you kind of getting the bow out and joining in a bit as well on that? How does that work?
Sometimes it's only electric bass. Yeah, it depends on the gig,
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there are gigs when I'm the only bass player, so I'll do all the classical stuff and then do the electric bass as well. Yeah, but it's really nice.
What are the things that slip? What do you really work on before you go into an environment like that?
Yeah, it's just bowing. I mean, a lot of time I'll take like a couple of hard etudes, Kreutzer etudes, and this and that and the other. I don't know, and I just take something out, and it's something that covers the bass, and a lot of different bowings and all that, and sometimes actually they do send you the music, so you have a chance to look at it, and go, okay, all right, great, yeah, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
So
last time I got sent a pad of orchestral music, I immediately forwarded the email on to another bass player and asked her to do it instead.
Yeah. I mean, I had one as well. We did, that was the London Musical Theatre Orchestra, and that was right after the pandemic. So this was my first gig back from the pandemic at the Albert Hall, and it was a full orchestra, and it was playing kind of West End music, West End, like songs from the shows and all that.
Yeah.
And the fixer said, "Oh, you can just can you come and do the double bass parts?" And I said, yeah, I mean, what do you mean? I mean, is there going to be a rhythm section player as well? So, oh, yeah, we'll get somebody for that. And I said, well, actually, I'd rather do the rhythm section if you don't mind. And he did send me all the music. And he was saying, oh, it's just Western shows. I mean, how hard can it be? And I said, yeah, it could be. It can be some, you can find some stuff. And so anyway, so I managed to kind of just take on the electric bass chair. I mean, but there was still double bass there, but it was more rhythm section. And when a proper legit bass player came in, I forget his name now. He's an older gentleman. He was very good, very nice, very good. And I thought, I'm very glad that he was doing that and not me. So yeah.
That might actually tie in quite nicely. I'm starting a thing called War Stories. Has there been a time in your professional career where you just got absolutely roasted, you were the wrong guy for the gig, or your bass blew up, a pedal exploded, like something where like you had a real bad day? How did you get through it? Did you get through it? Is it still scar you to this day?
You just described my musical career.
That's it.
And things happen, and there was one occasion that I remember. I was playing a show called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. This is like 2014 or maybe a little bit later. Anyways, and I was dapping for a great bass player called Don Richardson. Mm-hmm. And Don is the first call. He does a lot of sessions. He's a great bass player. And I have done the show a few times at that point. So I was like, okay, it's all good. You settled in, you're fine. And all of a sudden, this one show, I don't know what happened, but one of the pieces was actually the wrong sheet music got back, somehow made its way back into the pad. There was no markings on it. There were cuts in there, like 8 bars, 4 bars here and there and everything, and all this stuff. And there was no marking at all. And I think I just didn't remember. And I was playing. And when I went into the area where it was cut, but I was still playing because there was no marking, and all of a sudden, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm just so off of anybody else, Jesus Christ! And I thought, oh, I'm frantically trying to look in the while we are playing and trying to look in the music, like where am I? What have I done? I mean, I'm not this much of a moron normally, and so I couldn't find my place, and I was just trying to play by ear and kind of found it by ear, but then I kind of lost it again because there was another cut and there was this and that. And eventually, I think it was about a commotion of about 4 to 8 bars, or maybe 8 bars ish. And that's a long time when you're doing things wrong.
Yeah.
And the MD just went on the mic and said, Zoltan, stop playing. Okay. And so that was not a good experience. Because there is a band of very good players in there, and they're kind of looking at you. Well, what the hell is going on with you? And Yeah, that was
Just
not
stop
good.
playing. I
Yeah,
love
stop
that.
playing that. I
And that's
think.
particularly, I mean, like in a West End scenario like that was, I'd imagine, everything is, you feel incredibly exposed anyway,
Yeah,
and the environment is a funny one because it's in one part incredibly relaxed. Everybody's done it a million times. They can be on their phones, they can be reading a book in between the bits when they're playing music. But at the same time, the minute anything goes slightly awry, everybody can hear it
yeah,
immediately.
yeah. Of course,
And
of
there's a kind of
course.
a legendary thing in the West End called you get NA'd, you get never again,
Mm,
where the MD will say never again with that person. But you obviously
yeah.
didn't. You went back again afterwards. I presume the
Well,
story has a happy ending.
yeah. Well, I was very quick to, when that was the first half, and so when we finished, I just ran up to him with the music and said, "Look, this is what was in my pad. I don't know what's going on." And he said, "Oh, that's the wrong chart."
Yeah,
So, so I got out of it by means of, well, had I had the right chart with the cuts and everything in there,
yeah.
things would have been fine,
It
and
wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault.
yeah, and I mean, at that point, I kind of, I was known to the MD. People knew, people know you, and they know that you're not, that you're fine. And so it is. Things happen to everyone, not just me.
Yeah,
Uh,
of course.
and
We certainly we all have those kind of stories where, I mean, yeah, where something's gone completely horrendously wrong. Yeah,
I'll
man.
just tell you one more thing about if it's not so
Mm,
much that it was like roast. Well, I did get roasted because it was a hard pad to play. My second West End show was Legally Blonde
okay.
that I depped on again for Don Richardson, and I get in the first, and it's a lot of music to get through, a lot of stuff inside, a lot of corners to know, a lot of little banana peels that you can
Yeah,
slip and slide on and full. And I was sitting there before 7:25, it's coming to 7:30, and this is gonna start. And this was before my first show, and I was so nervous. And I thought, man, if I had a choice right now between playing this show or death, I'd choose death. It can be really, really, I mean, I've had the experience. That was when I first started that kind of West End uh,
yeah,
gigs and all that. But I mean, you get into it and you kind of, you learn the ins and outs of things and how things are done and all that. So you get experience and you kind of handle it better. But at the time, it is for a young player. It is, yeah, it is very nerve wracking. But you have to go through it, and you'll make
yeah,
your mistakes, and people will know. People will hear that overall you're a good player, and
yeah,
they'll come to you and they'll say, look, watch this, watch that, go back and relearn that, and practice, just work on that, okay. And they'll tell you what to do. They'll tell you what they want from you, and if you come back and do that, and you serve the music and the band, and what they ask you to do, you'll work.
What are the kind of key skills that you would say to a young bass player who wants to get into that? What should they be working on?
Be as prepared as a musician as you can be on your
Right.
instrument. Know your instrument as much as you can. Obviously, know your musical content,
Hmm.
everything that you can. Have good ears, have good ear training. So if something goes a little bit wrong, you can follow. You can use your ears and follow. And I think to me that the real challenge was because I was a jazz bass player. Besides working in the little symphony orchestras back home and when I was a kid, but then you're sitting with 8 other bass players. So if you did something wrong, it doesn't matter. You'll just kind of catch up with everybody else.
Yeah.
But I think that the biggest challenge for me was to learn to follow conductors,
Hmm.
and so I have learned the best way to do that is that you always put a little bit of the music in your little cache memory. They send you the pad when you learn these shows. They
Yeah.
will send you a pad, so you don't go in and sight read it. Nobody ever does that, But make sure that you know areas where the music, you have rallentandos, you have cola voces, you have stuff that is not just playing, that is not just 1 2 3 4 and off you go and play.
Yeah.
All those are very important to watch the conductor, to really be able to follow. I think that's what I would say, to get your hand on conductors videos if you can,
Yeah.
and actually take the pad and learn it and watch the conductor. And if you're not a player that is used to that, if you're a classical player, it's fine because that's what you do. So you'll be fine with that. But yeah, just be as prepared and as trained on your instrument, and that's not just based on any instrument that you can be. And so that's not in your way. So the instrument is not in your way. So that is automatic, and you can just watch the music and the conductor and play. That is very important, I think.
Yeah, that's great advice. The first time I did a show, a lot of it was on click. So kind of like you say, a lot of it was once you get your 4 pips and you're in, you're kind of off and you're just playing music and it's fine.
Yeah.
But the bits that are on, like on the nod, as they'll call it in there, or cued, and I mean, this is a good example where you're looking on a tiny little kind of grainy monitor in the pit. Quite often you won't have a direct line of sight to the conductor. So you'll be watching them on a monitor and you'll have to come in with a bunch of other people sometimes, and it's just kind of there. If you're not used to that, that is very nerve-wracking. It's a very alien experience to when you're used to a drummer counting something in, or a sax player counting something off.
That would be the main things. Know your instrument and know the pad, know the music as well as you can. Do your homework, basically.
Yeah. One of the things I said to your students at Leeds on Tuesday in the Enrichment Week talk was recognizing the opportunities where it makes sense to do kind of an unsensible amount of work. If you're a student right now, it might be just coming up to your next exam. That's not 1 gig's worth of work. You have to put in an extraordinary amount of work to make sure that that opportunity is grasped properly, so that then you move on to the next opportunity. And obviously with gigs, something like the West End, I remember the first time I did it, I must have practiced that pad for at least a month, and pretty much every day. So that when I went in, you want it to be as comfortable as possible because there's enough challenges on the night. And I think those things are really important. If you put in a crazy amount of work for that opportunity, and then someone like yourself now, it's not quite so nerve-wracking in the same way because you've done it a lot, because you were allowed to progress up that ladder, because you took the opportunities when they were really hard, and then it does get a bit easier as you go along.
Yeah, of
hopefully.
Course. Yeah. And that's a very good point. And you said that really well, that give that time, put that time in, because if it's 4 weeks or 5 weeks, but if it's a show that will run for years, you'll get a lot of work out of that if you do it right. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's very, very important. I mean, big shows like Wicked, Lion King, Hamilton, they take a minute to get to know and learn the music. But if you do, and you do the first few shows, and then people start to like you because you play well. And just one more thing for young people: also be nice and friendly. If you have any kind of egos or any kind of big things about yourself, that leave it outside the door. Musicians are very nice people. They are kind, they are good people, and they're very low key as well. Most of the people I know are very low key and cool, and just be that. Be friendly. That's also very important, actually.
Maybe that ties into our final question then. Now, normally this is, what advice would you give to young Zoltan who's going out there to make his way in the world? How could you help that guy's progression through either the musical ranks or just the kind of professional, the business side of it? What advice would you give that guy? And I suppose that ties in for someone like yourself. What kind of advice can you give to your students who are about to go out there into the big bad world?
Be open. I think that's one thing. Be open. That's what I would have actually told myself back when I was a kid, because I was so set and I want to be a jazz double bass player, and that's that. I don't care about anything else. I want to get the classical education so I can become a great jazz bass player, and technique will not be in my way, and all of that, and all the soloing and all this. And I think I should have been more open to other music, more open in my classical education. Maybe I should have actually done a bit more with that, and also just to be open to music in general, rock music, pop music, funk, which I loved. I always loved funk and R&B, so that was always there for me to listen to. But I didn't really listen to rock music, to pop music. I just wasn't interested. It's not an indictment on the music itself. They're great music in pop music and all different styles. But that's what I would actually tell myself. Just be more open, because I may have lost a couple of things or a few things along the way because I simply wasn't interested. I remember in LA there were opportunities to kind of do like rock bands or pop bands and things like that. And I thought, nah, I don't want to. I don't know if you know about it. There's a great electric bass player in LA called Chris Chaney.
Yeah, of
And
course.
Chris used to come to our house, and I used to teach him double bass. You know, he was full of humor, full of life. He was amazing. You know, and he was a
Yeah,
great funk player already back
yeah,
then.
yeah,
I think I'm talking, man, it's like 95, 96, Jesus, almost 30 years ago. Chris was always into different things. He used to bring the Alanis Morissette cassette tapes at the time. You know, we used to have cassette tapes and for us to listen to, and what before she was known at all. You know, and
yeah.
she's, oh, I'm in this band with this girl, and I think it's really good. What do you think? But you know, and we used to sit with him in the kitchen or whatnot, or outside, and then listen to the music. And yeah, and he's done really well. He's a fantastic player. I mean, my God.
Mm,
But I think also because he was open to things. You know,
yeah.
I may have that if Alanis Morissette called me before she was famous, I may have said, "Oh yeah, sorry, thanks. I've got a jazz gig on, you know, so I'm just going to do that." You know, so
It could have been
yeah,
you, man. Could have been you playing
no,
bass with Alanis Morissette.
yeah, no,
Thank you so much for today, man. It's been great to catch up.
oh, pleasure,
Definitely,
and thank you.
whenever I've been on the other side of the microphone in these things, I've always been sure to say that you're definitely one of the biggest influences I've had on my bass playing and my career. So
Oh,
thank
that's
you for
very
that,
kind.
and thank you for being part of it. We'll speak to you soon. Thanks, Zoltan.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.